So I watched this movie with my father, and at the end of the movie, he turned to me and he said, "Be honest, son, did you pirate this?" And I said, "Yeah, Dad, I pirated this." And he goes, "That's good. I think they got a good deal out of it because they should have paid us to watch this movie. I'm not someone who advocates stealing normally, but I'm going to make an exception here." And I'm like, "Yeah, that's more or less how I feel about this film as well." This movie was bad. Really, really bad. I think the only scenario under which this would be enjoyable is if you're like drunk and you're watching it with some friends of yours and you just laugh at the film. And that's just about the only thing I can come up with. Now, to be fair, if I had have watched this from like a streaming service with subtitles, this probably would have been better because this film has the second worst sound mixing. I guess I'll just get into my review. The second worst sound mixing of any movie I've ever seen. The worst is Tenet. This is a close second. The sound mixing in this film is fucking atrocious. I had to put my TV up to 100% volume when I normally have it at like 20 to even hear the dialogue. I'm going to be honest, the sound effects are probably, I'm not very good with sound numbers, but I guess like 50 to 100% louder than the dialogue. The music's also like about twice as loud as the dialogue. So what you have to do is if you want to hear it, you have to just turn it up to 100 whenever people are talking, and then desperately try to get it back down to 50 if music starts or if an action scene starts. But if I wasn't like straining to hear and just putting up with it being like almost loud enough to hurt my ears, I would not have been able to like make out the movie. I think halfway through I figured out that my TV had a setting that emphasized voice, and when I put that on, that made it a little better. But no, the sound mixing was garbage. It was filth. It was atrocious. And that's something I have no patience for, and it's something I always complain about when I watch movies, is I just hate it when some parts of the sound are way louder and some are way quieter. Because you put up your sound really high, and then it just makes like a loud noise, and it like blows your speakers out, and it's just really obnoxious. So that's number one. That's the first reason why this movie sucks. It physically harms you, or I don't even know if harms you, but you can't like watch it. It's borderline unwatchable for the simple fact you can't make out the dialogue in a fairly well, I don't know if I call it a dialogue heavy movie. So the dialogue was fucking horrible. It's not like the writing and acting wasn't good. The acting in this film is some of the worst I've ever seen. As far as like editing, writing, acting, and sound mixing, this film is honestly a combination of X-Men Origins Wolverine and Terminator 2, and that is not where you want to be. I guess it's less boring than either of those movies, but like the actresses in this are just atrocious. The doctor lady and the random Madison or whatever, the girl who wants to investigate it. Um, I'm looking at the Wikipedia page. The Wikipedia page is a fucking joke for this film. Like, they describe the characters in a way that has like makes it sound like this film had a script, which it did not. And they're like, "Oh, this character was an homage to this. This character was like this complex Machiavelli." None of that happened in the movie. So I'm gonna be honest. I don't like monster movies. I tried to enter this film with an open mind. I don't know what it is about them. I just find them like normally kind of boring. They have a lot of dialogue that's generally uninteresting. And then like the actual monsters destroying the cities, I just don't find it a very compelling action scene. Of the MonsterVerse movies, I guess the only one I kind of liked was Skull Island, because it wasn't as much a monster movie as it was like a Lost World movie. And it kind of reminded me a bit of some like Victorian Indiana Jones adventure. And I kind of like that, so that was a little bit better. So that's kind of my bias. The only monster movie I actually like the '98 Godzilla as like an action comedy movie. I don't really get why people shit on it that much. And now that like most of you have clicked away, let's maybe just get into this film. I admit I don't really remember. I've seen the other MonsterVerse movies. I don't really remember anything about them other than Ken Watanabe fortunately getting killed off in the past movies, so he didn't have to come back for this piece of shit. So let's describe the plot. So this is 5 years after Godzilla King of the Monsters. Now, I'm not really sure when so Godzilla King of the Monsters came out in 2019 and this came out in 2021. I think it was supposed to come out last year, but it's 5 years later. It's just kind of confusing. But I digress. So Kong, for some reason, is inside of a dome on Skull Island. So apparently, because Godzilla is the alpha male or the Giga Chad of Earth, if another Titan shows up, then Godzilla would come and fight him. So to protect Kong, they've put him in this. It's like the Truman Show. There's like this giant dome that projects images of Skull Island, but it's on Skull Island, and they're just holding him there, for some reason. So then you have Bernie Hayes, who I'm just going to call Black Engineering Man. Oh, this also reminds me of Cowboy and Aliens. We'll get to that in a second. And he's investigating it, and they have like some Edward Snowden shit where he's trying to blow the lid off of this company called Apex. Now, what's the difference between Apex and Monarch? I guess it's kind of like the difference between SHIELD and Stark Enterprises, although that one makes more sense. But apparently Apex and Monarch are two different things, I guess. And then we find out that the Earth is hollow. That was probably in a previous Godzilla movie. I don't really remember. It's kind of stupid, so that might be the reason I don't remember it. But to get to the hollow Earth, you don't actually like just go down a hole in the Earth's crust. You have to go through a portal to another dimension, but the other dimension is within the Earth's crust. And later in the movie, Godzilla blows a hole all the way through the dimensional barrier with his atomic breath. Or something like that, I think. I don't know. It doesn't make any fucking sense. I know I'm complaining about stuff in a Godzilla movie, but it's just like the basics of this film are fucking like, I don't even know what's going on most of the time. So he's trying to investigate it, and he discovers this like massive device or something. And then Madison, who's the worst actor I think I've ever seen in a movie, who's the daughter of the head of Monarch, listens to a conspiracy podcast, and Godzilla shows up and attacks the Apex Cybernetics laboratory. And people are like, Godzilla's gone rogue. Godzilla's no longer the person who protects humanity. So to fight one Titan, it's like that shitty movie Clash of the Titans. We need to get another Titan. So they're like, what we have to do is there's this energy source in the extra dimension at the center of the Earth that's causing Godzilla to attack people. So let me just look at this. Okay, no, the Wikipedia article doesn't explain it. Like at all what happened. Okay, so the energy signature in the extra dimension they think is causing Godzilla to attack, but it actually isn't. It's some like G-slur op from Apex, I think. So their plan kind of reminded me of Evangelion Episode 8, Asuka Strikes. And it kind of made me wish I was watching that instead. So their like master plan to go into the Earth's crust or the extra dimension is they're going to take Kong with them to Antarctica to protect them when they go into the Hollow Earth. So they get together the U.S. Navy's fleet, which includes battleships for some reason. I don't know why they have battleships, because all the battleships have been retired a long time ago. It just reminds me of like how in Evangelion they have battleships, even though I think all the battleships were retired by that point. But they're like, they have Kong chained down on one of the ships because they're taking him with them and they're like dosing him with drugs. So then Godzilla shows up and they let Kong go. And then Kong like jumps from ship to ship. Like Unit O2 does in Evangelion, and fights Godzilla. And there's like some really shitty like fight scenes. And then they get dragged underwater. And then they fire depth charges. And Kong crawls out of the water and lies on the ship panting. And Godzilla, like, for some reason, doesn't realize that Kong is still alive and leaves. And I was like, turn to my father and I'm like, how can he not tell that Kong's still alive? Kong's obviously still moving. He's like, look, son, he's had a rough day. Some assholes dropped death charges on him. He swam all the way across the world. He's just tired of it. I'm like, that's as good as excuse as anything. So they decide that because the fleet got destroyed, what they're gonna do is they put Kong in a giant net, and they transport him to Antarctica, like thousands of miles by helicopter. And then he gets there, and then there's this girl who does sign language. And the sign language is actually nice because it has subtitles. So I could actually tell like what was being said in the sign language scenes. And she's like, your family's in there, Kong. You have to go save them. So they get into these like futuristic, I don't know if they're fusion propelled crafts or something, to go into the like the alternate dimension that's actually not an alternate dimension. It's the Hollow Earth. So that shit happens. And after that shit happens, the rest of the people wind up in Hong Kong, and it turns out that the son of Ken Watanabe's character from the previous movie is working with some Hispanic guy, and their plan is they're making Mecha Godzilla. And rather than just have an AI pilot it, or use any other kind of conventional, I don't know, like, just have it be a robot, or just use, like, wireless remote control, like a drone. They're like, their genius plan is they took the still semi-living heads of King Ghidorah, and they have one with the VR console hooked up to it, and they put another one of the heads in Mecha Godzilla, because apparently the heads were so far apart they communicated telepathically. So it allows like Ken Watanabe's son to sync with King Ghidorah. No, with Mecha Godzilla. And that doesn't work. So like it turns out the whole thing of them going into the planet's core is they get this energy signature. And they don't actually need to bring any of the things that generate the energy. They just copy the wavelength, and they send the wavelength, and then they pump the wavelength into Mechagodzilla, and then he becomes 100% fully charged. So apparently that's all that's needed to solve the global energy crisis. You just change the wavelength of, like, electrical output or something? I don't know. None of this makes any kind of sense. Once again, I get it that it's a dumb, like, soft sci-fi action movie. I get that it's like a Godzilla and King Kong movie. But I can't even, like, follow what's happening in this film. I mean, I can, but it's just so fucking stupid. And it's not, like, campy. Like, at the end of this film, when Godzilla and King Kong team up, if they had done a high five, that would have redeemed this film. Like, if you're gonna make schlock, if you're not gonna, like, the editing in this movie's fucking, like, horrible. If you're not going to put any time or effort into it, at least give me some camp. Give me some like cheesy, like over the top, insane shit. Don't take yourself seriously if you're producing fucking Godzilla versus Kong. But it turns out that there was like an ancient race of giant gorillas. Maybe it's kind of ambiguous. And they were underground. And when they were underground, that was the only scene I liked in this entire movie, where Kong gets attacked by these winged snakes. And I always liked the concept of winged snakes. Like, my favorite D&D creature, other than maybe nightmares, are quaddles, or codals, or however you pronounce it, which are winged snakes, which I just think is a cool concept. So that was neat. That was the only scene in this film I liked. So they like find this super axe that Kong uses. He plugs the axe into like a hole in the floor, and that triggers like this energy surge that like powers Kong up. And then Godzilla detects him, so Godzilla blows a hole. And the hole somehow goes all the way down into the other dimension. So then Kong grabs the axe and he like flies up because of the weird gravity reversal thing. So then we get Kong and Godzilla fighting, and once again Godzilla just curb stomps Kong. I mean, Kong I think is significantly smaller. He doesn't have any of the immense biological advantages Godzilla does. Like, Godzilla has like a bulletproof exoskeleton. He has atomic breath. He has a tail. He's just a lot stronger. So he kicks Kong's ass. And then they restart Kong's heart by using the fusion reactor on one of the, like, hovercraft, I guess you could call it. And then Mechagodzilla, like, wakes up. But King Ghidorah comes back to life, I think is what happened. And it fries Ken Watanabe's son. And then Mechagodzilla is now completely autonomous. He's not being controlled by the computer anymore. So then, because it's King Ghidorah's skull is controlling him. He's developed his own brain. The movie's pretty clear about that. So then he proceeds to beat the shit out of normal Godzilla. And then Kong shows up, and then they like do a tag team takedown of Mechagodzilla. Mechagodzilla's still doing pretty good. But like what winds up happening is they're trying to do some hacking and turn off Mechagodzilla remotely. And I'm like, but that's defeats the entire... I thought the point was you couldn't control Mechagodzilla remotely. I thought the entire like purpose of this is you could only control him through like the telepathic machine, right? I mean, wasn't that the whole thing? But apparently it's not the whole thing. And then it turns out the Black Engineer guy got a holster, like a gun holster, and a flask full of single malt scotch from his dead wife. And he's like, I got this, and the day I finish drinking it is the day I die. And it reminded me of this fucking shitty knife scene from Cowboys and Aliens. But that we can talk about that another time. So they just pour it on the control panel, and it disables Mechagodzilla, and then they kill Mechagodzilla, and then Kong goes back to the Hollow Earth, and then Godzilla leaves, and that's the end of the movie, and there's no setup for a sequel that I can determine. And that's the movie. It's fucking ass. Like, there's nothing good about this film. I can't think of, like, anything good or enjoyable or likable. The movie is fucking like is so retarded. It's not even campy. It's not even like over the top enough. It's just fucking boring. And all the MonsterVerse movies are like this. They're like bland, boring Marvel movies, but with monsters instead of superheroes. And worse acting and lack of characters. So I'm gonna say this movie gets 2 thumbs down. This film was ass. like, I guess if you're like a really hardcore Godzilla fan, you might want to like watch it. But overall, I'm going to say that this film is a massive piece of shit and don't watch it.